Oh, hi there. I was just adding some flaps to the back of my airplane here because I was going to see how it might affect the way the airplane flies. It's something that engineers do all the time. They start with a base model and then they make changes to it to see how those changes affect the final results. I'm going to be asking you to do the same thing today. But first I want to talk a little bit about what we know about how airplanes fly so that when you're making your own paper airplanes, you can think about the four forces that are involved in flight.
There are four major forces that act on any airplane that's flying: gravity, thrust, lift, and drag. But when we're making a paper airplane, we're not able to control some of these things. And so I want to spend most of our time looking at the things that we can control. Now, obviously, we can't control gravity. The gravity which pulls the airplane towards the Earth is the same everywhere on Earth. There's nothing we can do about that. So when we're making our paper airplane, there's nothing we can do to adjust the gravity. Thrust on an airplane is what makes the airplane go forwards. For example, the jet engines. We're not putting jet engines on our airplane, so really the only thrust comes from when we initially throw it into the air. After that, the airplane is on its own. So we can't do much about thrust. What can we control? We can control lift and drag. Lift is what makes the airplane go up, and it's caused by air flowing over top of the surfaces. And somehow when the air flows over top of the surfaces, it makes those surfaces go up, perhaps because there's lower pressure on top. That's lift. What about drag? Drag is what makes the airplane pull backwards a little bit. If you are trying to maximize the speed of an airplane, you're going to try and minimize the amount of drag. Think about drag as the friction that the air is pushing against. If you had, for example, a big flat surface at the front of an airplane, the air would go towards the flat surface, hit it, and then push it backwards. That would be drag. If you're trying to make the airplane go as fast as possible, you're trying to minimize drag. However, sometimes you need drag in order to make the airplane go one way or another, or to slow down when it's landing. So it's not always your enemy. Anyways, when we're making our airplane model, we're going to try and make different adjustments to try and play with the lift and the drag to try and achieve different goals. Now, one word about how engineers make adjustments to their design. An engineer will start with a base design and then make different models based on that base design with different adjustments. And what's really important is that each new model needs to only have one change. Why? Well, because if you made a design that had a whole bunch of changes all at the same time, then you wouldn't know which change is achieving the effect that you're trying to do. For example, if this new paper airplane went faster than the old one, is it because you put on a clown nose? Is it because you made it green? Is it because you put spines on it? Or is it because of the jet engine? You don't really know. That's why you need to make one change at a time. That way you can figure out what change causes what effect. Another thing that engineers need to think about is control variables. Control variables are the things that you want to keep the same the entire time, because if you don't, things are going to mess up. I'll give you one example, but you're going to have to think of some other ones on your own. If you've got 3 different models that you want to test with a paper airplane, you always want to throw it with the same hand. Why? Well, because usually people are right-handed. Sometimes they're left-handed, but usually they're right-handed. And your right hand is usually stronger than your left hand. So if you threw the airplane sometimes with your left hand and sometimes with your right hand, they wouldn't be launching at the same speed every time, and you would be messing up the results. You wouldn't know if the change in speed was due to the clown nose or the jet engine or the spines, or just because you were throwing it with different hands. So you want a control for that. So the control variable says, keep it the same. Always throw with your right hand. Or always throw with your left hand. It doesn't really matter as long as you keep it the same. That's what a control variable is. It's something you want to keep the same all the time for each experiment. So what are your experiments going to be? Well, I have 2 challenges for you. Number 1, design an airplane that can stay in the air as long as possible. That's in terms of time. And then number 2, design an airplane that goes as high as possible. For each of these challenges, I want you to make a base model and then make multiple modifications and then see how those modifications, or changes, affect your results. For example, if I put flaps on my airplane, is it going to make the airplane go higher or lower? If I change the direction of the flaps, how is that going to change the height? So you need to keep track of the changes you make, the measurements for each of your model, and your control variables. That's the variables that you keep the same each time. Things like making sure that you always throw the paper airplane with the same hand. So that's your challenge. But before you do that, I'm going to need to show you how to make a base model for a paper airplane, and then you get to make the changes and adjustments based on the initial design.
So now that you've got your challenge, how are you going to make your base model? Well, I'm going to show you how I make my basic paper airplane, and then you can use that design as the basis for yours. And then you can make little changes, add flaps, bend things forwards, bend things backwards, try and add some drag to the airplane to see if it might change the way the airplane flies, try and make more horizontal surface area to see if it will make the airplane stay in the air longer, things like that. But first, let's look at how to make the basic paper airplane. Alright, so here's our piece of 8.5 by 11 letter-sized paper, and the first thing you want to do is just fold it lengthwise. Fold it lengthwise. Some people call this a hot dog fold, I think. And then you're going to unfold it again, and you can choose one side and move the corners inwards so that they touch the center crease. 1, 2. Then you're going to fold inwards towards the crease a second time. Take the out part, fold it inwards towards the center crease, and fold down. Inwards towards the center crease, and fold down. Finally, you're going to fold it in half again, and this time fold outwards. So take the top part and fold it outwards, away from the crease, and push down. Flip the airplane. Fold outwards, away from the crease, and push down. And that's going to be your basic model of a paper airplane. The final step that I would recommend is to take some clear tape and to put some tape right over top of the airplane so it doesn't come apart during flight. Now you need to find somewhere to test your airplane. That's going to be difficult. See if you can find a long hallway so that you can throw it as far as possible without worrying about it hitting something. Like this.